negotiations, what people usually think is that negotiations, it's a one-time conversation. Also, a conflict is not a one-time conversation. I think we as women, we consider sometimes everything is negotiable. And I also trapped into that in my own career when people were giving me more and more work. And I always said yes. But on the other side, I had learned at some point, and maybe a little bit too late in my career, to say, okay, if I say yes to the other people, I actually say no to myself. I say no for my family. I say no to my own needs. I say no to my own time. And so I think to really also define, okay, what are your non-negotiables is very, very important.
In our episode today, I had the pleasure of chatting with Astrid Mayrhofer, an expert in negotiation and emotional management. Our conversation went into the world of negotiation, exploring how women can navigate business, family, and self-negotiation more effectively. She emphasized the power of preparation, sharing that understanding your goals and defining your non-negotiables are key to any successful negotiation. She also highlighted the importance of managing emotions, reminding us that taking a break during heated conversations can provide much needed clarity and foster more productive discussions. This episode is packed with practical tips and good advice to help you harness your inner strength and negotiate with confidence. Remember, setting clear boundaries and staying true to yourself are vital in any negotiation. So please grab a cup of coffee and tea and feel comfortable to learn and feel inspired with our guest today. Welcome to the Brilliantly Branded podcast. Hello and welcome one more time to the Brilliantly Branded podcast, and where, we aim to keep our audiences with practical, strategic, and inspiration. And this time we are going to do it across a brilliant woman. My guest today is a senior human resources leader and entrepreneur as well, that will share with us today a wealth of expertise to the table that is part of the value that we are delivering. And I'm going just to talk a little bit about her journey, but she will give us detail later on. And she has been really marked by a commitment to empowering organizations through their people. That is probably the most important thing always. And she has been navigating complex landscapes and leading difficult conversations with grace and insight. That is what we are going to learn today. Our focus is on negotiation. So this is our conversation is going to be about. That is a skill that is crucial in both professional and personal life. So particularly from a women's perspective, that a Brilliantly Branded podcast is women empowerment. So that's the reason why I am giving a warm welcome to Astrid. And Astrid, the first things, welcome. And my first question is, could you introduce yourself, please?
Thank you very much, Maria, for this very kind introduction. And obviously, thank you very much for hosting me on your podcast, which I followed in the last couple of months. And I think it was amazing who you actually had already on the podcast, and therefore I'm very humbled that I have the opportunity to be with you today.
Thank you.
Yes, with pleasure. I'm happy to introduce myself, and I would like to start with a quote from Mahatma Gandhi, which is, "You must be the change that you want to see in the world." Because this is my motto throughout my career and throughout my life. I was actually very attracted by Mahatma Gandhi already when I was a teenager. And although he didn't live in my lifetime, I still found a lot of value in his insights and in his guidance. And he continues to inspire me even today. And I try to follow his ideas to my best abilities. Well, I mean, further than that, I'm Austrian by birth and European by heart. So I lived in 7 different European countries, and I very much found this a very enriching experience. And I also was able by that to build a very international and and very international community and friends. So that's really very enriching, and I do not want to miss that. I'm a mother of 2 teenage children, which is sometimes a challenge, but overall, I think they are amazing individuals. And I know I'm biased here. Yeah, so I'm not objective, but I really think that they are doing great. And as my children are now much older, I can follow again my passion in sports. So I do a lot of different sports. I like skiing, hiking, I play golf. But I also do yoga, which helps me a lot, to keep me in balance throughout my career, which was not always easy and which was also sometimes very stressful. And yes, I'm probably an introvert and an extrovert at the same time. So speaking in front of people is not an issue, although I'm very nervous today, I have to admit.
No, please.
And and sometimes I simply need to, need time on my own and do some photography or read a book. And on the other side, I really like to link people, connect with people, have meaningful conversations with people. So it's a broad mix and a broad variety of things that I like to do. And obviously, at some point in time, I also need to earn some money, which I did for more than 20 years in a corporate environment. And since 1.5 years, I've now started my journey as an entrepreneur. And I partner with CEOs and senior HR executives or professionals to drive their people strategy. As you said, initially negotiation, but also culture and neurodiversity are my particular interest. And that's probably because my first education was actually psychologist and mediator. Well,
Wow.
that's in short where I'm coming from.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing, especially this personal side, because as an individuals, we have our professional life, but as well our personal life. Here, we love to listen into those stories. Where are you coming from? Who is your family? And all these kind of things are important in the way that you are managing your life. So basically, and getting into our main topic with your background in HR and negotiation that have been one of the things that have been given this differentiator in your career. Actually, I wanted to ask you this key difference between this negotiation in business, in family, and actually one thing that is important, how we can negotiate with ourselves.
Yeah. I think a very tough task to negotiate with ourselves. And nevertheless, I would like to start with the common grounds. And the common grounds is really get prepared. Whether you negotiate in business, whether you negotiate with your family, but even with yourself, you need to get prepared to have all facts on the table. You understand your own interests and your own limits. And you also then need to be prepared to find the mutually outcomes that you want to achieve, the mutually accepted outcomes. Yeah. So I think across all 3 dimensions of negotiations, you need a proper preparation and also, be aware about the emotional dynamics that might come up. And even in the professional context, you might deal with more emotions than you actually think. But what is different, I would say, is, as I said now, is emotions and logic nevertheless. I think in a business negotiation, the rationale is much more in the forefront than the emotions. You might come across some of them, but obviously a family setting is much more emotional and less about the facts. So you need to pay attention to those. You need to address those. And that's something that's in a business negotiation very often not the case. Although I recommend to actually call out emotions even in a business negotiation, because it can unblock sometimes negotiation topics which are sitting on for quite a while, and you're not getting them resolved because there are emotional blockers in the back. And I think when you are negotiating with yourself, it's actually a blend of both. And it's actually equally strong. It's the emotions and the rationale that you need to combine that you need to align, and then you only can be successful in your personal negotiation with yourself. So that's part.
Now, this is challenging for me. I mean, negotiating with yourself, and I am going to let you finish your sentence. Sorry about that, but actually I'm struggle with that a little bit, because how do you separate your own feelings with the rationality of what you should be negotiating? I mean, you can reply that after that. It is, I'm struggling with that.
I think many of us struggle with that, and I'm happy to give you more details, because I think there are two ways how to approach it, a personal negotiation. And there are even people say, never get into one, never get into a negotiation with yourself, because you can never win that negotiation. Because for whatever you decide, you will decide against one thing. If you have let's say, two different positions that you negotiate yourself with. For example, should I take the job or should I become self-employed? You will decide at some point for one of them, and you will always think, was it the right decision? Did I do the right choice? Maybe there was something out that was better, And so I think you cannot lose, you cannot win and you cannot lose, because on one side, yes, you're deciding for one thing in the end, but you have decided against the other thing at the same time. So you never feel like this is a win-win situation. It's more like, maybe I have lost something. And therefore, maybe stepping back and saying, okay, I'm actually not negotiating with myself might be a solution.
Yeah. Okay. And related with in terms of a business that you said and mentioned, that bringing some emotions, or probably verbalize that there is some emotions in between. How do you manage that in a conversation when you cooperate with your employee and these kind of things, when you become a little bit emotional having those conversations? How do you manage that situation?
So I think it's twofold. So how do I manage my emotions and how do I manage the employee's emotions? My emotions, I usually manage with a very proper preparation, and also analyzing what emotions do I bring to the table. And once I'm clear, okay, this is my setting, then I find arguments, or I find a tool, or I find a process which makes me feel more comfortable and to keep the emotions out of the conversation. So think about, for example, as an HR professional, I had to do quite a lot of dismissals. And although I am a professional and I know how to do them well, I don't like them. I don't like those conversations, where you need to tell a person in probably 10, 15 minutes, you're fired. That's not a pleasant conversation to have. So I can go into this conversation pitying myself, or saying, oh my God, what a shitty conversation I need to have. But on the other side, it is something where I owe the company as well as the employee a professional conversation. So I have the possibility to prepare and then to deliver a professional conversation, or I let myself guide by my emotions, and then obviously I will end up in a conversation which will be very difficult, because the other party, the employee, will be for sure emotional. If somebody gets the message, you're fired and you don't need to come back tomorrow, nobody can react rationally. Nobody can say, oh my God, yes, I've seen it coming. Even if you have seen it coming, you are emotional. So if I add my emotion, which is the HR employee, on top of the emotion of the individual, that is proven to be wrong. It's going wrong, certainly. And so I think it's very important indeed that you are clean with your own emotions before you enter into this conversation. And if the employee, for example, becomes very emotional, you simply let it happen for a certain period of time, which means I can't give you any minutes, but probably 3 minutes or something. Yeah. And then you try softly to push the person into getting out of this, emotional mindset. And sometimes it's actually helpful to say, okay, you calm down, you go home, and we continue our conversation tomorrow. Yeah. Because when people sleep one night over, they have conversations probably with other people, then it obviously gets easier also for them. And to show the people, okay, you're there for them, you support them, and it's something that you also don't take easy. You respect them, and you give them the opportunity to more or less also leave the office with dignity. It's something which is very, very important and which usually calms down the emotions also on the employee side.
I can imagine. And there is my question there. You said at the beginning, you need to prepare the conversation. But what happened when that conversation is unexpected? So, for example, that situation that you explained is unexpected. So I arrive and receive this news, how I can be managing the situation in a way in that I am not going to be that affected. I guess during your career, you have been seeing many different situations where the people have been reacting in a different way. But what will be your advice based on how to manage an unexpected conversation?
Of course, people can react in 1,000 different ways, and you cannot be prepared for 1,000 different ways. Mm-hmm. But on the other side, if you stick, I think, to a few ground rules, which is having a transparent and clear conversation. So really talking, not politics, but really talking about what is happening, being authentic, and also showing the other person, not overly strong, but showing the other person, okay, I feel you, I hear you, showing some empathy. And on top, also showing the other person that you understand the concerns. Yeah, I think that helps very often. And what I've also seen, and I think this counts in private life as well as in professional life, but also with when one has difficult decisions to take by oneself, is not to overload the conversation with additional arguments. So I think what we tend to do is if somebody's in a disagreement with us, we try to convince somebody. And that usually ends up in a series of arguments which don't make it easier, which actually make it more complex, and which actually deviate us from the actual topic of the discussion. So what I have learned in my career is really, even in difficult conversations, you're not trying to convince somebody of your position, but you probably run one or two arguments, and then you repeat those arguments, and you don't ask for the other person to follow you, but to make clear, okay, you will not move from your position because, for example, when I dismiss a person, I have not the authority in HR to say, okay, actually, I hire you again. The person needs to understand, okay, you are dismissed. Yeah. And so I just stick to that assessment, and people very often ask me, would you be willing to actually take this decision back? This is one of the first questions that I always get when I have to have those conversations. And to make this a very clear, I'm very sorry, but no, there is no possibility to turn that decision or to change that decision, is a very clear statement, but usually very helpful for the people.
Well, that is very interesting, especially because, all the situations are presented in your workplace, and actually not only there, it is in your family. So let's say in your workplace, you have the opportunity to learn how to behave, how to create certain arguments, and your advice is very wise. To put it in practice. But what happened with the environment is in your family? Because, if people is asking you, for example, in the work environment, well, can you rethink that? That is, you can change that decision. But what happened in the family? Because it seems my experience sometimes in family is like everything is permissive. It's an environment where you are feeling safe to ask for whatever you need. So how do you manage this kind of negotiation inside of your family?
I think the tools remain the same. Probably you have a different emphasis on them. Yeah. I think to establish ground rules for those kind of conversations is very important. And so what I do with my children, I try to establish those ground rules way before I actually need them. So I teach them already those ground rules in a normal conversation, and in a more heated conversation, which is more emotional, then I would remind them of, okay, can we please follow these kind of rules, which means talking in an I approach, a perspective. So it's not you have done this, but I did not feel comfortable because you were doing that. I think the other point is to practice active listening and generally not following some kind of hidden agenda, but really trying to sort the issue and being open for different solutions, because I think if you come into such a conversation and say, okay, mine is the only solution and you need to accept that, you're proven to fail. So to stay very open and say, okay, maybe the other party has actually a very good solution for the problem or the discussion. That's very helpful. And when my children then realize, okay, they are acknowledged for what they can bring to the table, they are acknowledged with their ideas, it helps very often to actually sort the issue, because very often, obviously, they want something that I don't want them to do. And in that situation, to make them realize by, for example, asking questions, okay, maybe it's not the best idea I do it that way, I need to do it in a different way, is very powerful. Because when they find their solution themselves or the alternative themselves, they're more likely to accept it, in fact.
Yeah. What happens when you have different point of view that are not arriving to a middle point or to an agreement? How do you manage that?
To accept it, and sometimes to conclude a conversation with, yes, we are of a different opinion here, but it's fine. We are different people and we have the right of having different opinions.
So in terms of, in general, business, family, do you think that is good, for example, to have a break, to say, well, for the moment, we leave the conversation here and we are going to take the conversation after and we are going to think about that, take some air, and that will change our way to see the things? Or what do you recommend as an expert?
It's a very good suggestion, Maria, because also in negotiations, what people usually think is that negotiations, it's a one-time conversation. Also, a conflict is not a one-time conversation. And you put far too much pressure on yourself, and probably then that triggers emotions when you think, okay, I now have 30 minutes and I need to do this. That never works. You need time, and you need time until the other person is ready, until you're ready. You have set the ground, you have set the floor. People are in a safe space and they are ready to talk. So also sometimes, my children start discussing something in the supermarket. And I said, I'm sorry, I'm not in a position to discuss in the supermarket whether you come home tomorrow in the evening at 6 or at 12, at midnight. I can't do this. I now focus on something else. So this is clearly not the right space to discuss that. Yeah. And to take a break is very, very powerful, because then everybody can calm down, can, analyze potentially the emotions that were coming up, thinking about the other person's perspective or position, and then think about, okay, how do I actually re-enter the conversation to make it more pleasant, but also to make it more output driven, that we find a solution in our dispute.
Well, this is super challenging. I'm saying that, but sometimes, when you have this kind of argues and things that you say, well, this is moment to stop. Sometimes that generate a kind of a resentment in the other person, like why you are stopping the conversation right now and not solving that problem. And when I see that it's not other solution, I have the tendency to stop and to say, let's have a break. And I think it depends of the way that you have been raised. Actually, culturally, I think that this is in the background, and I want to ask you that if that is true or not. because some cultures have been learning since they was kids how to argue, how to really have these kind of conversations. On my personal side, sometimes it's like, no. You never argue. You keep everything all the time perfectly well. And I have been learning how to argue in certain ways. So what you will be advising to all those different cultures and all those listeners that are now here about how to manage that specifically?
It's also a very important aspect. Indeed, we are living in a very international world, and therefore culture plays in. But let me take a step back to your first part, which is how do I actually end a conversation which is probably still heated, and the people feel not ready, or some people don't, or your counterparty doesn't feel ready to actually end it. And yes, it's a difficult message to give. I can see that, and I had that also in my past, yeah. And on the other side, what I usually do is to tell the people facts, tell them, okay, look, we are struggling now since 15 minutes, 30 minutes to find a solution. It seems that our views are very much apart. Let's step back, go back, think about it quietly again, and we come back and we agree on when we come back. I think this helps a lot the people to let go, because they know when they can pick it up again. So when you actually then say, okay, look, let's resume the conversation tomorrow at 6 p.m. when everybody is calm, we have time and we can rediscuss. So everybody knows it's now over. There will be a second part. And until then, everybody can think. And if you even want to challenge the other person and yourself, you can even summarize and say, okay, in the meanwhile, I will do this. And you can ask the other person, and what will you do in the meanwhile? And then you agree actually who has to do what, that you can solve it the next time. So there are ways, and it's all about the way how you communicate it, which will bring you, the better outcome. So coming now to culture, which was the second part of your question. So culture, indeed, in negotiations is a very, very important piece. But on the other side, we should not freak out, because we are all somehow similar in the end. I agree, some people have more experience than others. And but on the other side, everybody wants to be accepted, wants to be treated respectfully, does not like conflict, so all of this is universal across cultures. So I don't think we should overemphasize it, but I can also give you a very personal example about different cultures and how I perceived it the first time. Because when I did my first training course on negotiations, I got a role play to play with, which was actually very familiar to me, because I was a job seeker who had to negotiate her salary. So something I knew from both sides of the table. I did it for the companies, I did it for myself. So I felt quite secure in this topic. And I got a man from Saudi Arabia to discuss that topic with me.
Wow.
And I prepared as I would usually prepare, and the result was the worst result I've ever have achieved. Why was that? Because I was not considering that this young gentleman from Saudi Arabia does that day in and day out to negotiate. They learn it even when they are, going to the market, when they are in their families, and he was really putting me into the corner, and I myself lowered my expectations of what I wanted to earn. And how did he do it? By just saying no. And by me, I'm being a typical woman. If I get the no, I'm just pulling back. So it was a very powerful learning for me, to say, okay, yes, for certain cultures, you need to be much stronger. For certain cultures, you probably also need to act differently as a woman. And so I was challenged in very many ways when I had that conversation and that role play. And on the other side, I really liked his way, how he used the pause, because he just said no, and then nothing followed.
Yeah.
And I was like, to fill this pause, I immediately said, okay, but maybe we can talk about this and this, you know, and maybe if I lower my salary expectations, then you could accept, etc. And he was just coming back with another no,
Yeah.
and another pause. And I was like,
Wow, that is amazing. So knowing what you know today, what you will say to this Astrid in that moment to really get out a good negotiation.
I think what I know today and what I would probably advise myself at that point in time, be much more secure about yourself, about your worth. I did not define what I was worth in this situation, and I did not stick to it. I got it influenced by what he was willing me give to me. You know, I actually adjusted, and I was not standing my woman to say, I'm worth this. And if you say no, then we have a no deal. I was still trying to get the deal, although it was not favorable for myself.
Yeah. Well, this is a lot of lessons to learn. And this is the kind of conversation that we end up having with ourselves when we are not succeeding in a conversation, in a salary negotiation, even in a business negotiation. We are wondering after, what should I do better this time? And learning that lessons is probably one of the most important things. Well, that have been absolutely amazing. The things that you have been sharing with us, Astrid, today. I don't know if you wanted to add something else, especially about how the people can be better prepared. Well, you have been already given a lot of advice, but something additional that you wanted to add, Astrid?
Maybe something that I would like to add still is on the negotiation with yourself, because I think we've covered it very, very briefly. But I've said, okay, maybe it's not something that you should enter into very often. And I think one addition that I would like to make is really also to define what is non-negotiable for you. Yeah, because I think we as women, we consider sometimes everything is negotiable. And I also trapped into that in my own career, you know, when people were giving me more and more work. And I always said yes. But on the other side, I had learned at some point, and maybe a little bit too late, in my career, to say, okay, if I say yes to the other people, I actually say no to myself. I say no for my family. I say no to my own needs. I say no to my own time. And so I think to really also define, okay, what are your non-negotiables is very, very important. And that's something that I would like to add to, beside thinking of whether you should negotiate with yourself, be very clear what your non-negotiables are.
Yeah, and actually I will add something just because my experience, and I think that is keep an eye on your values, because based on your values, having that clear, you will be able to set your boundaries and giving your worth to the world, you know, is something that by personal experience have been happening, and is really, really wise advice that you are giving to us. Thank you very much, Astrid, for being here, sharing with us. Where the people can contact you?
The best is LinkedIn, because I was, although I'm now more or less running my own business since 1.5 years, I still have no website. So I think, or I don't have any other means. Yeah, that's probably something that many entrepreneurs face. Yes, I think I've approached it differently than many other people, you know, who felt like, okay, they need to be very well prepared. From my side, I did not prepare that much, and I had very quickly some clients.
Fantastic. People can contact you on LinkedIn. And really thank you, Astrid, for being here. And I hope that the people get to know you more and how you can help them. Thank you very much for being here. We hope you have been inspired by this content and join us for future episodes of the Brilliantly Branded podcast. We will continue exploring the power of branding and the stories behind successful brands. And remember, if you know a woman who has built a successful brand with a unique approach and a story to share, please refer them to our podcast. We would love to learn from their experiences and share their story with our listeners.
Stay tuned for most episodes of Brilliantly Branded, and don't forget to follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, on our YouTube channel for more branding insights and women empowerment. Until the next episode, ciao ciao.